Good morning, History 2145, and welcome to week 7. So, this week we're going to be addressing the social and sexual revolutions of the 1960s and 1970s. And the reason we're doing it at this point in the course is obviously we have been able to kind of set the stage with, some important kind of contextual moments of the post-war period. Obviously, we have done a fantastic job in just kind of laying out this constant thread that is the Cold War and how that international conflict that dominates the second half of the 20th century has influence on both the foreign but also on the domestic. And it explains the way to which the federal government responds to many of the kind of socio-cultural conflicts of this period. The second is really trying to kind of set how the culture of abundance of the 1950s, of that quintessential American dream of, say, the Leave It to Beaver kind of Hollywood picture of the 1950s, the suburban household, is kind of ripped asunder with the social and sexual revolutions of the 1960s and 70s, and then also, right, broadly speaking, talking about civil rights movements and so on and so forth. Okay, so if we take this context, the 1960s, particularly by the end of the decade, represents kind of that first generation of, or I should say, that first wave of baby boomers to whom reach adolescence, have had that freedom to pursue higher education or employment in a way where, unlike their parents and their grandparents before them, without any major economic crisis, war, etc. And as such, right, this generation of Americans, right, having grown up in the culture of abundance, having the disposable income to, go to the movies, hang out at diners, to really kind of live without worry. When things start to go awry in the 1960s with the civil rights movement, with the Vietnam War, with other violence like, say, Stonewall in 1969, this generation becomes, in essence, as some commentators, radicalized. So what you're going to see this week as you go through the chapter is an effort to really kind of understand all of the social movements that take place, right? Obviously, we're going to talk about anti-war protests and, young Americans being critical of the Vietnam War, whether it is from the left or even the political right. You're going to look at the rise of second wave feminism in the 1960s that really carries through the 1980s, where this generation is influenced by the work of Betty Friedan and others to really highlight that, no, the American dream of the 1950s is not the dream of me. That, in fact, I would like to be a successful, independent, educated woman out there determining my future rather than having my husband determine my future. And then we also have, right, other kind of social cultural movements focusing on, obviously, the gay rights movement. With the violence taking place in Stonewall and of summer of 1969. And then certainly, right, all of the kind of counterculture, meaning the culture that doesn't kind of go with mainstream middle America of your mom and dad and grandparents. Whether that is the hippies and Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco in, the summer of love of 1969, whether that is the beatniks, or whether that is, what we would kind of associate today as early punk rockers in New York City. And so in essence, right, we look at the 60s and 70s as, right, a period in which that first wave of baby boomers, because of their circumstances in post-war America, basically kind of take a sharp left turn from their parents and really kind of navigate a whole new world than, say, they would have if it was a generation before, because these kids aren't living in the shadow of the Great Depression, the Second World War, the First World War. So, lots coming at you this week. And so as you're working through your reading in chapter 29.4 and 30.1, just realize that there is quite a bit of information coming your way. And so as you're working through the discussions, right, ensuring that you're providing the kind of clearest argument using the resources in the textbook for that. You've got quiz 7, discussion 7, and then next week is exam 1, which covers weeks 1 through 7. So if you've been heeding my warnings and working on the study guide since week 1, you should be well on your way to be successful on exam 1. If you need anything else, please feel free to reach out.